Speaking in the abstract, most Americans would agree that all citizens of the United States can say whatever they want, read whatever they want, and that the government has no business looking at anyone's private papers. That is in theory. James McManus has a case of specifics. The Battle of Pike County.
This is the story of three people and the Constitution of the United States. For better or for worse, they have been bound together for nearly a generation, and there is no end in sight to their ordeal.
I think the wrong class has got power in this society, and there has to be a change. I think most people, when they hear revolution, may think of violence and barricades and things like that. I don't think it's going to happen that way in this society. I think it's going to happen mainly through the vote.
I think that the attack that was made on us shows that the government is capable of doing things to people who want to change the system. So the case is like, it's not just the McSurley case, it's a case that belongs to all the citizens, just as the Bill of Rights belongs to everybody.
Not that this case has all that world-shaking importance, but it does illustrate one thing. Where do you stop people? Where do you stop people who would blow this country up or destroy this country? Some way, somehow, you must deal with it without destroying our Constitution.
This man, former Kentucky prosecutor Thomas Ratliff, has been locked in bitter conflict with Alan and Margaret McSurley since the late 1960s. In February, the McSurleys, who are self-proclaimed radicals, celebrated victory. Almost 16 years ago, they were briefly locked in jail for a political crime. Their home had been invaded, their personal possessions taken from them. They had been pursued by prosecutor Ratliff and a powerful U.S. senator. Their lives had been threatened. They had endured fear, public embarrassment, and years of courtroom battles to avoid prison and clear their name. And now a jury has ruled that through it all, they were victims, not criminals, and that Thomas Ratliff must pay them more than $1 million.
It wasn't just any kind of trouble, it was a particular kind of trouble that we were trying to stir up. And we still are trying to stir it up, and we want you all to help us. Thank you.
Well, Jerry Aches and Dottie Payne got married on the train, and now they say that the Georgia woods is full of aches and pain.
The trouble began here in Pike County, Kentucky. The McSurleys, young Marxist social reformers, arrived in the spring of 1967. They began recruiting poor whites to challenge Pikeville's coal mine millionaires and politicians. That challenge, organized by strangers in a land of God-fearing patriotic fundamentalism, turned out to be dangerous for the McSurleys.
Very, very dangerous, very dangerous. We're a clannish group, and back in that period of time, more so than now, they resent the outsider. They resent the outsider, I think.
That's Pikeville lawyer Dan Jack Combs.
Their fathers,
he met the
their mothers.
McSurleys soon after they rented a house from James Madison Compton.
Well, to start with, I thought they were fine people. But later on, it didn't turn out that way.
Well, what was it that changed your mind about it?
My neighbors, more than anything else, calling me, asking me what I was doing renting my property to communists. I had no idea.
Compton spread the alarm to the courthouse. The McSurleys insist that Prosecutor Ratliff, a successful coal operator and candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Kentucky, jumped at the opportunity to advance his political ambitions by leading a raid on their new home, an old rented house that stood just there. Ratliff denies it, says he played only a minor role in what happened that night.
The search warrant was given to the county sheriff. He made a search of the property. I was asked to be present with the county attorney and the county judge as a sort of an advisor, observer to the goings-on there.
They had guns. So I called to Al and I said, "Hey, Al, there's some cops outside." And then we heard this knock at the door.
I pull open the door, and just as I pull open the door, about 3 guys come racing by me. One of them was Sheriff Perry Justice, the high sheriff of Pike County. Sheriff Justice had a Polaroid camera and was taking pictures, and a couple of them said to me, "Hold your head up high, and we want to see what you look like when you hang."
Before they could assemble a team of defense lawyers, Alan and Margaret, who was 4 months pregnant, spent 2 weeks in this jail. They were released on bail, charged with sedition, plotting to overthrow the governments of Pike County and the Commonwealth of Kentucky. The posse had filled a pickup truck with hundreds of their books, papers, and personal letters. It was ugly from the beginning. After defense lawyer Dan Jack Combs walked out of this courtroom where he stood beside the McSurleys, a man swung a knife at him and missed. And there was more ugliness to come.
Well, our house was dynamited. Some people did try to kill us. And the first thing I thought of was to get out of the house, get the baby and get out. So that's what I did.
They fled to Washington and fought back. A federal court denounced Kentucky's sedition law as unconstitutional and ordered their belongings returned. But they collided head-on with the late Senator John McClellan, who was seeking communist links to race riots that swept the nation in the 1960s. McClellan secretly obtained copies of some of the McSurleys' papers from prosecutor Ratliff, including love letters Margaret received before she met Allen from the Washington political columnist Drew Pearson, an arch enemy of McClellan's. Senator McClellan then demanded all their personal papers, and when they refused, he had the McSurleys convicted of contempt. The McSurley case became a celebrated cause. The nation's most formidable civil liberties lawyers won reversal of their contempt conviction, and finally a civil jury ruled that Ratliff and Senator McClellan had conspired to rob the McSurleys of their rights to read and say what they pleased, and their right to be safe in their own home. Citing the First and Fourth Amendments to the Constitution, the jury ordered Ratliff to pay more than $1 million in damages and assessed Senator McClellan's estate for $200,000. Attorney Morton Stavis recalls his plea to that jury.
And that I asked them to consider themselves the representatives of the American people in saying to people who violate constitutional rights that they may have to pay if they do that, and pay heavily.
I think I did exactly the right thing. If I had to do the thing over again, I'd do it exactly as I did in August of 1967 because I carried out my duty, my sworn duty.
Things were never the same after the raid and after the terror of, that we lived in Pike County, and after all the things that happened. Things were never the same.
The McSurleys won vindication of their rights and punished their adversaries, but they too paid a heavy price. They were divorced last year.
There's only so much stress that a human being can take, and certainly only so much that a marriage can take. It ate away in an insidious way in our relationship, and finally the marriage just, there was no longer any reason to stay married.
If the McSurleys' love went cold, their fervor for social change remains undiminished.
Hi, how you doing?
Hello.
Is Reverend Wingate's not here, is he?
He was upstairs 2 minutes ago. Who are you?
She probably will tell you when, they're going to set up this meeting now. And now the present plan is sometime about...
Alan McSurley is still a stubborn organizer, now working on a plan to use fellow letter carriers to register minority voters.
And that's what we're doing. And we'll work in the courts, we'll work through the ballot box, work through the unions, movements, whatever. That's what it's all about.
Well, I agree with Al about that. I think that's very important. However, in order to keep body and soul together, I took a secretarial job, and one of the conditions of employment was that I would not organize my co-workers, which sometimes it really gets to me because it would be a piece of cake.
I've borne the burden myself individually State of Kentucky, Pike County, nobody has done a thing. The federal government, I feel like the federal government ought to pay my expenses in this thing. I would not be in the position I'm in now were it not, had it not been for the McClellan Committee. I think I've been victimized. I've been victimized to the point, if this thing continues, I will lose everything I've got to these people. This case isn't over yet. Circuit Court of Appeals is there. I think we've got a good appeal, because I think that's, to this point, it's a miscarriage of justice.
I think I always liked Mount Rushmore and Stonehenge and pictures of those things when I was a kid. The giant heads on Easter Island, I remember looking at those. I think I sort of wanted to leave something in Los Angeles that people would wonder about in years to come.
People are already wondering about Kent Twitchell and the enormous people he's been painting on walls all over Los Angeles for almost a quarter of a century.
I look forward to this, coming up here and looking down on the world and doing my murals. I love this hand. Both hands are going to be magnificent.
And large. Just the hands are 7 feet long. Think of the music those hands could make. That's Ralph Morrison. He's concertmaster of the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra.
Okay, roll this beauty out.
When the piece is completed, 40 musicians will loom over the harbor freeway, instruments poised, perhaps to play a little Haydn. One of the best places to see a Twitchell is from your car, and in LA traffic, there is often a lot of time to get a very good look. This one's the official Los Angeles Marathon mural.
Some of the greatest runners in the world are in it. My wife is in it. She is the Canadian runner.
The first person Twitchell tackled was someone he idolized.
I want to do the ultimate Hollywood film hero. And Steve McQueen was just, to me, he had a certain magnetism that was hard to really pin down.
But where to put his hero? A friend volunteered her parents' house. He didn't get paid for the McQueen portrait, but its success led to a commission from the second largest bridal shop on the West Coast. The groom was bridal shop owner Carlos Ortiz. He wanted a 2-story painting, but after seeing the sketch of himself, he asked Twitchell to tackle 5 stories.
I didn't have a clue as to how I was going to paint a 5-story mural. So I went up on the roof of that building, looked down, and I was more than a little bit frightened. I was not fond of heights.
Till then, all of his people had been monochromatic, basically shades of blue. It was time to expand. That man on the wall is 6 stories tall. It took artist Kent Twitchell 9 years working part-time to paint artist Ed Ruscha up there.
I had no idea what to expect, but wham, there I am.
What was it like posing for him?
Well, it was very difficult because he had me sit in the sun over at his studio, and I had to stare in the sun. He needed that sun on me to get the light just right. I think he got my right hand very good for some reason. I think that right hand he got.
Ruscha was painted directly on the wall. That doesn't happen anymore. All the painting is now done in the studio. Working from photographs, Twitchell sketches the figure, always considering the scale of the wall. Then assistants working on a giant paint-by-number picture begin to fill in the graph-like squares. This is Michael Jackson, a 10-story tall Michael Jackson.
This is an area to the left, lower left on the Michael Jackson mural, which is simply background. And you can see we're putting as much emphasis on the background in every square inch as we are on the figure.
The we are 6 painters, painstakingly tackling the acrylic saturated material.
Acrylic paints are so tough, and they will simply swell up when it gets hot, and they'll contract and get hard when it gets cold, and the moisture passes through them. They're very sort of friendly out there. And nothing much happens to them, nothing much affects them.
It's very exacting work. All the tones perfected by choosing just the right combination of pigments. Jackson will go up on this wall right in the middle of Hollywood. Walls seem to speak to Kent Twitchell.
This is a city of just beautiful walls to lust after.
What makes a lustful wall?
Scale. Scale is different from size, of course. Scale is when something looks monumental, even if it isn't. The Freeway Lady had scale. She was only about 30 feet high.
He painted his Freeway Lady in 1974. The lady became a sort of unofficial freeway landmark. And then one day, the owner of the wall painted her out. With no warning, she was gone.
That was the only time that I ever actually got tears in my eyes, because I never was ready for that. I expected her to be there forever.
Twitchell went to court, suing for the right to reclaim his lady, now covered with white paint. He won.
Too high? Yeah, what we should do is go after the nose and mouth.
Okay.
Using a paint-stripping heat gun, the work has begun.
Oh, very good. It is very exciting after all these years to see that smile back.
There is a Twitchell person on a building in Philadelphia, one in Santa Monica, and one on the campus of Biola University.
Just having people at their grandest, an individual person, is a miracle. I want people to be able to look at the pores of the skin and realize what a miracle life is. I keep getting more and more detailed. I've got to stop sometime at some point. I think this is it.
Back on the scaffolding, 60 feet above the ground, Twitchell is just where he wants to be.
In the intensely competitive sport of international yacht racing, the Whitbread Round the World race is the ultimate, the Olympics. Held every 4 years, it generates tremendous excitement in dozens of countries, where an estimated 800 million people follow it on television. The race is an extraordinary endurance test, a 9-month, 33,000 mile circumnavigation of the globe through some of the most treacherous sailing waters anywhere. Four crewmen have been lost overboard in the 20-year history of the race. But the Whitbread has attracted only limited attention in the United States, partly because there has never been an American entry.
Here it is, to Winston, ladies and gentlemen.
This year, there are two. One, skippered by the most famous name in American sailing, Dennis Conner.
We've got about 100 yards till we tack.
The other by Nance Frank, a veteran offshore racer who has put together the U.S. Women's Challenge, an all-female crew that is determined to prove that they can compete successfully in this male-dominated event.
Almost there, almost there, almost there, almost there.
When her boat crosses the starting line next month off Southampton, England, Nance Frank will be fulfilling a dream born 16 years ago when she was living in Rio de Janeiro and saw a Whitbread boat coming into the harbor.
Okay, to the main traveler.
I looked into the men's eyes on this boat, and I saw people who all looked like they'd won gold medals.
Really?
And I said, whatever that is that they've done, that's what I wanted to do. They told me about the 50-foot waves and dodging icebergs and whales, and the more I found out about the race, the more interested I was, and as time went on, I just set my course to race around the world on a competitive boat.
Now, perfect. Okay, and a little bit of ease on the main now, and more wraps on the main.
But whose boat? Despite her racing credentials, Nance Frank found that she was unable to get a berth on Whitbread boats skippered by men. Many of the women on her crew have had the same experience.
It's one sport women really hadn't broken into.
I'm pulling down too hard!
Barbara Spann is a 31-year-old advertising executive from Chicago who got her first offshore racing experience in the galley.
I lied. I said, oh, I'm a great cook, no problem, crew of 20. I can't cook to save my own life. My theory in life is you date a cook or hire one.
Do you feel that you have something to prove?
Personally, I do, and that's that as a woman, I can compete with the best of the men.
Okay, Leah, she's all tied off.
And what a competition it is. From Southampton, 16 state-of-the-art yachts representing 12 countries will race across the equator to Punta del Este, Uruguay. Leg 2 is a 7,500-mile downwind run across the Southern Ocean to Fremantle, Australia. Then it's the short leg, a mere 3,200 miles to Auckland, New Zealand. Then around the treacherous Cape Horn, back up to Uruguay. The fifth leg brings the fleet to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, before the final sprint home to England. The women who are putting their lives on hold for the next 9 months to pursue this dream come from every background.
I'm Susan Chu, and I'm from Thousand Oaks, California. And I'm, beside running my household with 4 children, my husband out there, I basically work for a UN organization.
My name is Margaret McSurley, and I'm from Massachusetts. And I've only just graduated about 1.5 years ago from Brown.
Just go slow, Leah.
My name's Leah Newbold. I'm from Auckland, New Zealand. When I'm not sailing around the world on a boat, I'm a chef by trade.
Well, when they first contacted me, I said, I can't do this. I'm fat 59 and unfit.
Sandra Welch of Charlottesville, Virginia, who describes herself as the ancient mariner of the crew, is the mother of 4 grown children. An expert sailor who will serve as cook and provisions officer, she admits to some pre-race nervousness.
You're jittery and you're apprehensive, and it's not like going for a walk around the block. And so much of it is luck. Tons of it is skill, but the weather and things like that is, and where those growlers are and where those icebergs are. You have to be concerned. If you're not concerned, you shouldn't be out there.
Ease it off just a little bit. Ease it just a little bit.
The women's boat is a 64-foot advanced design racing machine that costs more than $1 million. But the accommodations below are anything but luxurious.
This is our ever so spacious galley.
Crew member Barbara Spann.
And we can heat water, and we can heat water to put our freeze-dried food in it. Here's our shower right here. We have the small shower, and we have the large shower. What we have here is what we call a gimbal head, which means it moves. That you can sit on it, and you can rock and roll with the boat. So that's really luxurious. This is probably the best feature of the whole boat. This is our favorite.
How on earth can you get through 9 months or long, long legs just sleeping, you know, a couple of hours at a time?
Take the absolute limit that you've been to and then double it. And that's what we're going to have to go through, truly.
Beyond endurance, it takes money, lots of it. A fully sponsored Whitbread Challenge requires at least $3 million. Skipper Nance Frank.
So far, we've raised 1.8 in actual contributions, corporate contributions, private money, and pledges.
In '89, it was terrible.
4 years ago, when she assembled another all-woman crew, their mortgaged boat was repossessed at the last moment, forcing them to abandon the race at the start.
And when we got back to the dock, there was an envelope for us, addressed to the American women who want to race around the world. That was the only address. And it arrived from a women's sewing circle in western Pennsylvania. There were $16 and change from 12 women.
Wow.
And the note inside said, "Go for it." And we said, we can't stop here. We've got to do it.
I see the red markers. We're gonna need the main end.
This year, the U.S. Women's Challenge has the money on hand to cross the starting line, but not yet enough to outfit their boat with the top quality sails and high-tech equipment they'll need to compete successfully against the world's best.
You want to win.
Absolutely. Well, I want to win. All of us want to win. We want to win.
Nance Frank, who has gotten this far on sheer determination, says there is no way she and her crew will be content to simply follow the men around the world.
Do the Harley.
Leah, Vanessa? Stop. We're gonna tack. I need somebody to bring the runner up.
Early morning near the Snake River in Idaho.
Get over here, Jake.
For a few dozen cowboys and history buffs and just plain dreamers, it's the start of day 25 on the Oregon Trail.
Wagon, follow!
Since the end of June, this small wagon train's been winding its way near the course of the original trail. A clattering, clip-clopping tribute to the very first wagon trains and dreamers who left Independence, Missouri 150 years ago. A remarkable undertaking made on blind faith. The pioneers had never seen where they were going.
The trail is real rocky, and it's over to our left a little bit, the original trail is. But it is really rocky and rough in there.
So what the original pioneers went over was worse than this?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah. This is a piece of cake, you know, really, with the frosting on it.
Les Brody of Sun Valley, Idaho is driving the lead wagon on this sentimental journey. He is 77 years old. His grandmother, Carolyn Bacher, came west on the trail.
She's telling about the buffalo herds in Nebraska when they came through. They were stalled for 3 days because they couldn't get through the migration of the buffalo.
If you look closely, there are still parts of the trail to be found, hidden in the wind-whipped sagebrush, ruts made by heavily loaded wagons a century and a half ago. In some places, power lines and towers mark the route now. The power company engineers obviously thought the pioneers cut a good trail. In Oregon, wildflowers have bloomed in the ruts that led to the promised land.
I don't know, it's unbelievable, the people that goes on the old ruts. The chill they say they get.
The chill?
The chill. Why do they get a chill? Because their ancestors came over there and they're walking in their footsteps.
son if you love me.
150 years later, all kinds of people are paying to tag along, to ride or walk near the ruts, to wonder what it must have been like.
And the cowboy who loved you so true.
That's why the Bishops came, Jim and Sally from Boise.
Problem. I guess as a mother, I think about how the women felt. A lot of them probably were pregnant on the trail or had children that got sick and they couldn't help them. And some of them didn't get well and they buried them alongside the trail.
And the McCurdy's, Lon in the homemade Western shirt that Lori made, Lori in the wagon. They're high school history teachers.
If I'd had any of my students in that wagon, they'd have loved it. I thought to myself, that's as close as you can get to a time machine right there. You know, that's pretty authentic.
It was such a huge undertaking. You had to be pretty committed to it.
And nobody made them do it. You know, it was I guess they say, I've heard several times this week, the greatest voluntary migration in history.
And along the way, where huge rocks stand on the horizon like exclamation marks, the immigrants stopped to write their names.
They may have been writing it for somebody who followed, or maybe not. Generally, though, the case is they were putting their names on there so somebody that came after could see that they'd made it. But considering they were using, gunpowder and axle grease and mixing it up to write things like that on, it's amazing that it's stayed here this long.
Nearly 150 years later, the names are there for Larry Jones to ponder. He is Idaho's state historian. He is bedeviled by this signature rock near Boise and the bold inscription, Aldo, July 26, 1853.
Who was Aldo? What was he doing? Just like you asked earlier. Where is he going and did he get there? These are things that I don't know that we'll ever have the answer. I've read, close to 1,000 diaries or more, and I'm always looking for the name of Aldo, and I've never run across anything nearly representative of that.
Really? And you always keep your eye out for Aldo?
Yeah, always, on the back of my mind, I'm always looking for something that might even be halfway similar to Aldo, and I've never run across it.
This anniversary trek, a 73-day-long celebration, is not the challenge the original pioneers undertook, not by any measure. Today's pioneers walk in designer athletic shoes. Meals are catered. There are high-tech refreshments to cool the weary. And the last Conestoga is a rolling comfort wagon, required by environmental law as much as modesty. And the real pioneers did not have a souvenir stand. Each night, the cowboys still fix their wagon wheels the old-fashioned way. And each night, people gather at camp to hear stories of the trail.
Oh, woman, where you been? Going to see the elephant. It means going to Oregon. Of course, everybody knows that.
In pioneer slang, the trip west really was called going to see the elephant, because no place could be that fantastic.
Yes, sir, that's right. Well, the telling gets bigger and more fantastical every time it's told, just like Oregon. So going to see the elephant means going to see Oregon. Course, make perfect sense to you now, don't it?
What do you consider to be the biggest myths about the Oregon Trail?
I think one of the myths that I always try to dispel is the rugged individualism of the pioneers. But as those who started found out right away, without a sense of cooperation in the community, none of them would have made it. Their cooperation might have been from the Indians, which was another myth in the beginning. Some of them had preconceived ideas about they were going to get scalped 2 or 3 weeks out from independence. But as it turned out, a lot of them wouldn't have made it without the help of the Indians.
The passage through Idaho was the most difficult part of the trail for the original pioneers. The environment was hostile. Summer temperatures often exceeded 100 degrees, and there was no turning back. After months of travel, the pioneers were committed. The good news, though, was that finally Oregon was only days away. Our modern pioneers have just made it into Oregon. Already they have a diary full of memories. Sunday, July 18th. Hallie Owens and Tim Rowe actually got married on the trail. Her wedding ring was made from 2 horseshoe nails. Tuesday, July 20th, Rattlesnake Creek. The wagon train was attacked by Canadians with cameras.
There he is.
Here he did. Would he kick you if you went up there?
Yes. Don't whoop. I'm not.
But the strongest memories of this Oregon trail may be what can only be imagined, traveling in the ruts.
Wagon, follow!
Mr. Geist, I
Yes.
have a delivery for you from Neiman Marcus.
Oh, is it my hat? Martha's always finding stuff like pink pepper berries in her yard. I don't think we have any stuff like that. Memorial Day nears, a time in the suburbs for the ceremonial lighting of the grill. I've kind of become one with this couch during March. I must have sat here and watched 100 basketball games. I've done a lot of stories like these over the years at my house in the suburbs. As you may have noticed. Yeah, they're ready, all right. But none lately. That's because we sold this house. The kids are grown and the suburbs are really all about kids, so we decided to move to the city.
Well, we're moving on now to the east side, to a deluxe apartment in the sky. Moving on to
New York City. I've never lived in the city, so it's quite a change. Space is the biggest difference. In the city, there isn't any. You can read the newspaper of the person next to you on the subway. Space is an extremely valuable commodity in Manhattan, where my 5-room apartment costs more than a whole house. There are no attics or basements or extra rooms in New York apartments. We had to throw our stuff away for 6 months before we moved. Still, when we moved in, these boxes just kept coming and coming and coming. We swore they were moving in other people's stuff. There's really no place to put it all. Some New Yorkers actually keep food and clothing in their cars because their closets get pretty full. We thought we were going to have to throw out our favorite couch. It wouldn't fit in the elevator until a guy showed up and offered to disassemble it for $300 cash. He told us not to watch. The kitchen here might be what they call a Pullman kitchen, as in trains, or a galley kitchen, as in ships, spaceships. You learn to live like an astronaut. The compact washer and dryer sit right here, one on top of the other. A large load, pair of socks. The dryer is right here next to the refrigerator, so you can use it to toss the salad. Some would argue that you don't even need a kitchen in New York. You can alternate between eating out and ordering in. You might want a microwave for reheating doggy bags, and your oven, it's great for storage. Hello? In this city, you can have anything and everything delivered. Even McDonald's delivers. In New York, you really never have to leave your apartment. The suburbs are about lawns. I used to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars every year mowing and fertilizing my lawn and blowing the leaves away. Now, Central Park is my yard. And it has a lot more to offer, but of course I do have to share it. The suburbs are all about cars, too. In Manhattan, a lot of people don't even have cars, and some have never had a driver's license. One reason, parking. $450 a month. You could park on the street if you hired a parking lawyer to interpret the signs, or you could quit your job so you could keep your car on the move at all times. Or else. You walk a lot in the city. In my old neighborhood, if you were going more than 2 blocks away, you drove. Suburban pedestrians not wearing a Walkman and spandex tights were liable to be picked up for questioning. One of the nicest changes is commuting. Instead of sitting in traffic, I can walk to work, take a taxi, a bus, or the subway. The subway is a little confusing. Maps. That's a little farther than I wanted to go. Metro cards. You make one mistake and you end up at Kennedy Airport instead of at work. I think that was my train. One of the best things about the move is having a doorman, like Joe. Hey, Joe. How are you, Joe? Okay. Whose job is to be happy to see you, and he helps you out with everything. Oh, thanks. 24 hours a day. Oh, great. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Okay, have a good day.
You too. Every American should have a doorman. Noise is a big factor. The suburbs are all about peace and quiet. Here we can barely sleep for all the honking taxis, sirens, car alarms, and we're very up to date on all the latest rap tunes that waft up from cars stopped at the light below. To drown it all out, we bought this noise machine, very popular in the city. It comes with your choice of babbling brook, spring rain, and my personal favorite, the countryside. So that I can pretend I'm back in the suburbs.
When you spot a motorcycle in your rearview mirror, what's your first reaction? Is it a sense of adventure symbolized by the 1970s film Easy Rider? Born to be wild. Or are you a little nervous? Could that be a Hell's Angel on your tail? I'm an angel on the highway. Relax. That motorcycle rider could be your kid's orthodontist or your car mechanic. And a lot of them are in a very good mood this weekend as they celebrate the 100th birthday of an American icon, the Harley Davidson.
It's probably the closest thing you can get to flying.
As David Ewell travels along the foothills of the Rockies near his home, his passion for the motorcycle is obvious.
There's a feeling and a sense of being freer than you've ever been in your life.
And to Ewell, a motorcycle is more than a great ride. It's a source of artistic inspiration.
The Harley Davidson is a very special motorcycle because it has a certain type of geometry that lends itself to being beautiful.
Yes, he said beautiful. For the past 4.5 years, Ewell has produced more than 40 paintings, all starring the Harley Davidson. Some have sold for nearly $50,000, allowing him to build this impressive house and studio outside Denver.
We call this a call of the wild.
Ewell began by designing those black Harley t-shirts with eagles and dragons and wolves. Then he turned to a larger canvas, paying tribute to the motorcycle's role in our nation's history, born in the same era as the airplane and the automobile. His paintings range from trips to the countryside in the 1900s, to racers.
She's on a 1926 single.
And flappers in the 20s, to this woman lounging on her Harley in the 50s.
Women are soft, curvaceous creatures, and then the bike is a hard-edged kind of sexy machine, and put them together and you've just got a dynamite combination, you know?
When it comes to motorcycles, he's compared to Norman Rockwell.
In the motorcycling world, my take on it is more about the feelings that it inspires.
He's not alone.
This painting here is called 100 Great Years.
Californian Scott Jacobs has turned out 162 Harley paintings over the last decade.
This is basically a timeline of all the most important motorcycles in Harley's first 100 years.
Scott Jacobs has been riding since he was a teenager. He loves the motorcycle as a machine. His work is filled with detail, glittering chrome, powerful engines, brilliant colors.
I think a motorcycle is definitely part of the American fabric. It's loved by so many.
At a recent art exhibit in Denver, the motorcycles were not only parked outside, they were also on display inside. Admired by men in black t-shirts and beards.
Oh, it's classic.
And also by the corporate crowd and country club set.
That seat is totally different.
The Hog has come a long way from its humble beginnings.
This is a full-scale replica, 10 feet by 15 feet, of the wooden shed that was built in the backyard of the Davidson home in Milwaukee.
Ed Youngblood is the curator of the Heroes of Harley Davidson exhibit at the Motorcycle Hall of Fame Museum in Ohio.
All they wanted was something that would get into the fishing hole quicker. But it turned into one of the leading motorcycle companies in the world.
Early in the 1900s, people accustomed to riding horses suddenly took to riding these motorized bicycles.
Until 1915, there were more than 200 brands, and all of that came to an end when Henry Ford created the Model T. And there was just no choice in what Americans were going to buy.
So why ride on two wheels when you could ride on four?
Excitement. From that point on, the motorcycle ceased to be a utilitarian vehicle and became a vehicle for enjoyment, excitement, and fun. And that's what it still is today.
Last year, 1 million motorcycles were purchased in the United States, the 10th straight year of increased sales. Japan dominates the fast-growing motocross and racing market. Harley trails Honda but sells more of the big highway bikes. And no one in America has done more to promote the sport than 70-year-old William G. Davidson, grandson of one of Harley Davidson's founders.
Hey, Taylor, how the hell are you?
He began Harley's art program.
I've always felt that a Harley Davidson was mechanical art or rolling sculpture.
Willie G, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Hi, how are you?
Willie G, as he's known, is a cult figure among Harley owners.
V-Rods.
He helped save the company from bankruptcy in the 1980s with his designs and insistence on high quality. Along the way, he cast off his coat and tie and opted for a different look.
There's a little bit of rebel in all of us, and I believe that. I'll tell you what, you go in your closet, you put on your leathers, you walk out in the garage, and you swing a leg over that Harley, you crank it up and hear that beautiful sound, and you're off in the boonies with your leathers on, and yeah, people do notice you, and that's part of the magic also.
The leather look has its roots in World War II, when returning American fighter pilots jumped on motorcycles and took their leather jackets with them. Some carried the enthusiasm too far. The 1954 movie The Wild One, starring Marlon Brando, was based on the trashing of a California town by some of those returning vets. The outlaw image was born.
In any sport or any major activity where you're dealing with a hell of a lot of people, you're going to have a group that maybe abuses what they shouldn't abuse, and of course the press goes nuts and they love it, and that thing just has legs, it won't go away.
To be sure, it won't go away, because there's also a darker side of motorcycling. Law enforcement classifies some motorcycle groups as outlaw gangs and accuses them of being involved in organized crime. And it's more than an accusation. In June, federal agents raided a Hells Angels clubhouse in San Diego and arrested some of its members on charges of gun violations and drug trafficking. Now, were you Ed Youngblood, who led the American Motorcycle Association for almost 20 years, says it's unfair to tar millions of motorcyclists with the sins of a few.
I'm familiar with the FBI reports on this, but I would point out that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with motorcycling. That has to do with criminal behavior and lawlessness.
Even Harley's TV commercials seem to acknowledge, even embrace, the motorcycle's tough guy reputation.
It's still not for everyone.
But the bad boy motorcycle image is fading, thanks in part to the late Malcolm Forbes, founder of Forbes magazine and an avid motorcycle rider.
Malcolm Forbes probably had more influence than any other individual in making motorcycles fashionable and acceptable among upscale Americans.
More than 20 million Americans now ride motorcycles. And more of them are women. And they're not just hanging on for the ride. Mercedes Ross, who also customizes motorcycles, says misconceptions about women bikers are changing.
When people walk into my shop, especially tourists who are not motorcycle minded, they come in, they go, "Oh, you're so nice." And they're surprised.
Hundreds of thousands attend motorcycle rallies each summer. Others turn on a growing number of motorcycle programs, which are becoming a staple on television, like the popular American Chopper on the Discovery Channel. So it shouldn't be surprising that a group of Denver enthusiasts gathered this summer to celebrate 100 years of Harley Davidson.
I met this guy in Sturgis once.
And in the middle of it all was Willie G.
Really cool.
In his own words, the ultimate gearhead. He says America's love affair with the motorcycle shows no sign of ending.
A motorcycle ride is an adventure. It's always a journey that's equally as important as a destination. So there's an emotional charge about getting on one of these great bikes and running across the country.
A journey that for some can't start soon enough.
Okay, so here's how you get started. You're going to take your both hands below this big knot right here. Get a good grip, pull, now push. That's it. Grip.
Most people have climbed trees as children. It's apple pie. It's very normal to climb trees. I mean, hey, the human species, you know, we used to live up there.
We're going up.
Peter Jenkins is the Pied Piper of the growing sport of tree climbing.
This is your tree climbing rope here. This is a special kind of rope. This is arborist rope.
In 1983, he founded Tree Climbers International, which now boasts more than 700 members worldwide. Their motto, get high, climb trees.
I'm just going to stand on this loop here. I stand on it, and the weight of my body pulls me in with the tree.
And trees are the classrooms at the climbing school Jenkins runs 2 Sundays a month in Atlanta.
And you want to sort of be quick and slide that knot up, so.
Jenkins is an arborist by trade. His job is taking care of trees. He modified all his professional techniques and gear for recreational climbing.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, pull. Yeah, push. Okay.
He figures he's taught thousands of first-time tree climbers.
This is proof that anyone really can do it.
For me, it gave a whole new meaning to interviews done on the fly.
So how does it feel now that you're up here? Great. Great. I mean, it's like I want to stay up here. I don't want to go down.
How do you like it up here?
I think it's great.
How old are you?
3.
So what do you want to tell other children?
I like to tell them I like to go all the way up into the tree.
The man I love and the man I live with is the founder of this sport. His heart is in it, and if he wants to do it, I want to do it.
You probably won't be amazed to learn that one of Peter Jenkins' most dedicated students is his girlfriend, Patty Schwartzman, until you learn a bit more about her.
I got my heart beating about 190 miles an hour.
I had polio when I was 2 years old. I'm 50 years old now, so I'm on crutches. And and usually people can climb with either leg. I climb with one leg.
And one of your hips is fused, is that right?
My left hip is fused, So my sense of balance is off, and so I'm using my arms more than most people would do in this sport.
Peter Jenkins?
Go ahead.
No, I want to see you. So if I fall down, you'll be the last thing I look at.
I got your rope. You ain't going nowhere.
And now she is training for the climb of her life. A fundraiser that she is conducting for her favorite charity, Doctors Without Borders. She has persuaded donors to fork up some $9,000 in honor of her taking on a challenge that's daunting even to pros like Peter.
I mean, this is no mean feat. I mean, this is a big tree, and she's been training for 2 months. And it's hard on her. This ain't no walk in the park.
It is, in fact, a climb in the wilderness. Peter and Patty are headed out to Washington State, deep into an old-growth forest. Their aim, to climb a 1,000-year-old, 200-foot-high Sitka spruce and spend the night in its branches.
Did you ever say to yourself, look, this is the kind of dream that somebody who is on crutches really can't possibly expect to be fulfilled?
No. No, somebody who's on crutches, who's a post-polio, that doesn't enter my head either, because post-polios are unstoppable. You know, if we make up our mind to do something, we're going to do it.
You're not worried about it for her?
What about Patty?
Yeah.
She's a tough old bird. You kidding me? You kidding?
Peter said you were a tough old bird.
I know he's going to pay for it, too.
And so the big day arrives. Peter and Patty meet up with the other climbers who've signed up for the adventure. Folks like Tom Dunlap, an arborist from Minnesota. This will be his 25th sleepover in a tree.
We're going through brush. Yeah, well, hey, we'll clear it once we get it. Once we get it in. Okay, I'll go up this and clear it.
I don't bleed, I drip sap, so it's just natural for me to be up in the trees. And spending time with old friends and making new friends.
99% of the time I'm in a tree, it's by myself down the street from my house, eating lunch.
Dan House is a heating and air conditioning contractor from Kansas City.
I find that this is a good outdoor adventure. It's vertical hiking, vertical camping. I just can't wait for the fog to come in and the sun to come up, and we're above the clouds tonight.
And the climbers are eager for you to know their focus on safety, both for themselves and for the trees.
There's no harm to the tree. Using climbers' spurs or gaffs like pole climbers, no, that's a no-no. Driving nails and stuff in the trees, that's a no-no. We don't want to penetrate the trees.
Mike Oxman shows how they get the climbing lines looped over the branches.
Got ourselves a shot.
The lowest, a good 75 to 80 feet above ground. Hundreds of pounds of equipment get hauled up. Safety lines, food, gear for sleeping, an amazing undertaking.
What are we sending up there? Sleeping bags for the night?
The pressure's on to get everyone treeborne before dark.
Up, throw line!
Up in the air so high that you can barely see the treetop encampment from the ground. It may be pull and push all the way, but these experienced climbers seem to glide smoothly up the trees. For Patty, everything is more difficult. With little use of her legs, her arms do most of the work. She inches up the ropes, stopping only for a little hug of encouragement from Peter. It will take her an hour to reach the canopy campsite. But what a campsite awaits her.
Holy tamales.
Tree hammocks and so-called tree boats, slung between the branches like so many cocoons.
Wow, welcome to the tree.
Hi.
Nice.
How high have I climbed?
It's 167 feet.
Really?
Yeah.
Being in the canopy of a tree is so totally different. It's a place to be rather than a thing to do.
Is there any food up here?
Yes, there is.
There's even room service, sort of.
Send turkey down, Dan. Oh, there's cheese on it.
Finally, Peter and Patty and their high-flying friends settle in for the cold, wet night.
What was that?
The morning dawns golden and bright.
Yellow line coming down.
Now the task of coming down the tree begins.
Now what do I do?
And for Patty, this becomes the hardest part of the climb.
Okay, sweetie, let's go.
She must use different gear to come down than she went up with.
That's it right there.
And despite all the hours of practice, making the transfer proves difficult.
Pull on this. Pull that. Go up with it. No, up.
Oh, up? You must be kidding.
No.
Up?
One rope.
The struggle goes on for 20 tense minutes.
You got me? Can I hold this? Oh, how the heck are you going to be able to get me off of this thing?
I'll get you off.
Finally, she's ready to descend.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Okay, very gently.
Oh,
You're okay.
The unstoppable Patty, Peter's tough old bird, does not disappoint.
okay. Now.
Beautiful.
But make no mistake, those are tears of joy.
Way to go, sweetie pie!
In fact, it turns out to be one of the happiest mornings of Patty Schwartzman's life.
Would you marry me?
Oh, no, you're not doing this.
The coolest woman I've ever known.
Oh, you're not doing this.
They were married yesterday, under a tree, of course.
Audiences have gotten used to George Takei, taking them to surprising places.
Captain, something there on the screen. Taurus 2.
As Mr. Sulu, the senior helmsman aboard the USS Starship Enterprise.
Warp factor 3, Mr. Sulu. Warp factor 3, sir.
With its unforgettable 5-year mission.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Isn't it amazing? In 3 more years, Star Trek is going to be celebrating its golden anniversary.
The ongoing popularity of that original TV series and subsequent feature films
Warp 6
have made George Takei a worldwide star.
I may not have trekked through the galaxies in reality, but I have trekked all over this planet. Australia, Asia, Latin America, Europe.
But of all the exotic places he's been, whether on this planet or beyond, George Takei is ever mindful of this place. A 500-acre plot of land in southeast Arkansas, where his journey began.
This was the south end of the camp, and that was the north end.
Rohwer, Arkansas, now just a fallow field, looked a lot different when the Takei family arrived by train in 1942. George was just 5 years old.
This was a concentration camp. We were all concentrated, densely concentrated. We happened to look like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor and put in prison camps simply because of our race.
His father, a successful Los Angeles dry cleaner, and mother raising George and his siblings, were among the more than 110,000 Japanese Americans sent to relocation centers like these, all in the defense of so-called national security during World War II. 10 camps in all, scattered throughout the country.
We were ordered out of our home at gunpoint, and my mother was the last to come out. And she had tears rolling down her cheek. It was a memory that I can never erase, to see your mother crying, and as we were being ordered out of our home.
Their new home at Rohwer was a small single room in a tar paper barrack.
I went to school and began every school day morning with a pledge of allegiance to the flag. I could see the barbed wire fence and the sentry tower as I recited the words, "with liberty and justice for all."
His family would spend 8 months at Rohwer and then another 3 years interned at a maximum security camp in Tule Lake, California. In 1946, his family was released, but George couldn't escape the racism of the day.
I started school in Los Angeles, and the teacher continually called me the little Jap boy, which stung. It hurt.
It was a different teacher, Ms. Lewis, who gave him a gift that set him on his way.
Thanksgiving was coming, and she organized a Thanksgiving play, and she cast me as the Indian chief that welcomed the pilgrims. And I still remember the line I had.
What was it?
Yohei, yohei, mitakula na humpu, omnichi nichopi.
That's a lot to remember. Though just a grade school play, Takei was hooked. He studied acting at UCLA and landed small roles in television and films, but parts for Japanese American actors were limited.
You have trouble in Seattle?
Why'd you ask?
White man never work in Alaska for Chinese wages, if not big trouble.
His big break came in 1965 when his agent got him an audition in front of Gene Roddenberry, who was about to launch the sci-fi series Star Trek.
Well, that was a game changer.
It broke the stereotypes.
No animals, no people, no worries. Just what the doctor ordered. Right, doctor?
I mean, I was a regular, visible, talking, walking, fencing presence.
You either leave this bois bloodied or with my blood on your swords.
Oh, you were handsome. Can I just say? You were hot.
And I felt hot.
Take over, Mr. Sewell. I'll be in the transporter room. Aye, aye, sir.
Remarkably, Star Trek lasted only 3 seasons. With his newfound celebrity, Takei tried his hand at politics. He ran for the Los Angeles City Council and lost, fought for Japanese American reparations and won, putting his very public face on causes that were close to his heart, all except one.
It must have been hard to be in the closet.
It was, because I had resigned myself, accepted the fact that I would live a part of my life closeted.
That all changed when a California marriage equality bill was vetoed in 2005. Angered by that decision, Takei came out publicly, eventually marrying his longtime partner Brad Altman in 2008.
I thought, my career might be over. But quite the reverse of that happened.
Okay, I'm a little confused here.
Oh my, can I help?
Not that kind of confused.
And popping up all over the internet, Takei has found a new generation of fans, millions of them, on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
I have to say, you kind of go off the rails.
How?
Well, I saw your dance moves.
I'm sexy and I know it.
It embarrasses Brad no end.
I was embarrassed for him, George.
Oh my.
His cheerful online persona has helped to raise awareness about his next very personal project.
But paper also change when folded up this way.
Bringing a musical inspired by his early life in the internment camp to Broadway. It's called Allegiance.
Let them aim their spotlights down, but smile real nice. Just put up and shut up, 'cause you're in paradise.
It's made for America. It's a story about the glory of our democracy, but also its fallibility. It's a musical that teaches us that lesson.
a lesson he learned in these fields in southern Arkansas and kept with him his entire life. And though he made his name in the sci-fi reaches of outer space,
Our barrack was right here, Block 6.
at age 76, George Takei hopes that his real legacy will be closer to home.
There's nothing I recognize here. It's totally changed, but it has defined who I am